DW Inside Europe.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kate Laycock in Germany. On today's programme, Ukrainian drones strike Russian oil refineries.
You've always in war tried to deny your enemy, aside from the direct battle, you try to deny them the logistics, the delivery of ammunition. The other thing in modern war is you try to deny them the delivery of fuel. And this was a major issue in World War II on both sides in every war sense. So here we are. What the Ukrainians are up to, this is interesting.
That interview coming up in just a minute. Also on the show, Ireland's Taoiseach resigns and the World Happiness Index reveals mixed news for Europe. That's all here on Inside Europe. The sound of a Ukrainian drone zooming in on a Russian oil refinery. In recent weeks, there's been a dramatic escalation of Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian oil infrastructure. According to Reuters calculations, Russian oil refining capacity shut down in the wake of such attacks in the first quarter amounts to about 4.6 million metric tons, or some 7% of total production. And in just one day last week, several major refineries thought to account for around 12% of Russian oil production were hit. Now, in order to understand the significance of these developments, I spoke to energy strategist and Wilson Centre Global Fellow, Dr. Tom O'Donnell. This, I put to him, was something new.
Well, not completely new. I mean, this happened, began back in January, but it's only been in the last week or two that it seems to be a really concerted campaign. And I did notice that it was only a month or two ago, maybe a couple months ago, that Ukraine had formed a special military unit dedicated to unmanned aerial capacities. So clearly this new directorate is at work. So what this shows me is that what happened back in January was not just a one-off sort of special operations thing, but it was sort of a dry run or a first run for a systematic campaign.
And in the run-up to the Russian presidential elections very much in inverted commas there, we saw an escalation to the point where we had an estimated 12% of Russian oil refinery capacity taken out in the space of one day.
Yes. I mean, of course, I have to say, when you hit a refinery, you don't necessarily take it out totally. And you don't necessarily take it out, for more than a day or a week or something. On the other hand, there are instances where they've taken out rather large refineries, some of the largest refineries in Russia, and they've been offline for over a week. It depends on what you hit. If you hit like the central cracker tower, we call it, that's very central to the whole process. So it takes them a while to fix that. One of the biggest refineries in Russia was built very fast to make a very large refinery, I think back in Soviet days, and they hit the main cracker, and that one's been off, for over a week now. So it's very significant.
And that significance is amplified presumably by the fact that these physical targetings of infrastructure are happening in tandem with more softer tools that are being used by the international community. The oil price cap, I think, being the key concept here. Perhaps you could just give me an oil price cap 101. Explain to me what it is and how it works.
No, this is a good question. There's really two aspects here. There's the war itself, and then on the other hand, there's the ability of Russia to continue making the revenues off the export of oil. And that's really overwhelmingly the main source of income for the regime and for the war economy. So the decision was made not to try to stop Russia's oil exports when the war began by the G7, and particularly the United States advocated this, saying that, this is something like 10 million barrels a day. If we start taking that offline, world oil prices could spike. So the decision was, instead of taking it offline to try and control its price, to put a price cap on of $60 per barrel. And that would be enforced by the fact that almost all the oil at that time that was being transported was on ships that were insured in the European Union or Britain. So it felt like there's a way you've got them. Now, the problem is, over time, they bought other old tankers either directly or indirectly, Russia now controls. However, with the multiplier of these drone strikes, this changes the situation in the sense that if you hit sufficient capacity, so that oil, unless they shut off the production of the oil, they have to export the oil. And that means they'll have to put more oil on the market. OPEC might not be pleased. And that will tend to drive the price down more.
That's so interesting. Perhaps you could just game it out for me a little bit there. If we have this flooding of the market with oil that Russia has been forced to export and we have a plummeting of prices, who does that hurt? What happens?
So all these older sort of sketchy ships are going across the Baltic from up near St. Petersburg somewhere roughly. And when they go through an area between Denmark and Sweden controlled by those two countries, it's their territorial waters. Legally, they can inspect the ships. There was an idea that, inspectors could stop these ships and say, they're not seaworthy to carry oil. It's too dangerous. And you've got sketchy insurance. And they could turn them back. Now, I don't think little Denmark was going to do that on its own. But now Sweden's a member of NATO. And together with the drone strikes, which may also, we'll see if the Ukrainians start hitting Russian ports. There's various things that could be done that could really significantly hit Russian oil. But it's a bit of a chess game. We're not sure what the strategy all in all is.
Right. I mean, the future's unclear. I was wondering about the past, about precedents. I mean, when you look at what's happening now, are there any precedents that come to mind?
Oh, my. Yeah. I would say I could write a textbook about this, but there are already textbooks. There's been many wars where the lack of oil have, made the difference. I mean, what happened to Rommel in the end in North Africa? He couldn't get his oil, and he was stuck in the desert, and the British were hammering him. Why did Hitler's army at the gates of Moscow suddenly decide to turn south towards Baku? Because he knew they needed oil. And then they had to get through Stalingrad, and we know what happened in Stalingrad. So oil in a war is a modern war. I shouldn't say oil, I should say the refined products, diesel and gasoline, are absolutely crucial. And if you look at the region to the east of Ukraine, down to the Black Sea and going up, the Ukrainians are hitting a number of refineries in this whole region. That whole region is absolutely crucial to get refined products into the war zone to the Russian mobile forces. And it's also crucial for transport inside Russia because almost everything moves by train, not truck in Russia, and they're all diesel. Furthermore, in the whole sort of southern region of Russia, last year there was a shortage of diesel fuel and gasoline for the harvest, and the farmers were protesting. So I think this could make it very difficult for supplying the front in Ukraine and also for the war economy at home.
It's almost glib, but it sort of occurs to me that, potentially this is a war that will not so much be decided by the barrel of a gun, but by the barrel of an oil drum.
You've always in war tried to deny your enemy, aside from the direct battle, you try to deny them the logistics, the delivery of ammunition. The other thing in modern war is you try to deny them the delivery of fuel. And this was a major issue in World War II on both sides in every war since. So here we are. What the Ukrainians are up to, this is interesting. Yes, there's problems on the ground until they start getting American weapons again, obviously. But what are they shaping? One possibility is they're shaping the ability to maybe go after Crimea in the long run. It's a long supply line for the Russians to get diesel into Crimea. This would be, maybe it's a shaping operation. We don't really know for battles that are to come.
Dr. Tom O'Donnell is a Berlin-based energy strategist and global fellow of the Wilson Center in Washington. He blogs at globalbarrel.com.
When I became party leader and Taoiseach back in June 2017, I knew that one part of leadership is knowing when the time has come to pass on the baton to somebody else, and then having the courage to do it. That time is now. So I am resigning as President and Leader of Fine Gael effective today, and will resign as Taoiseach as soon as my successor is able to take up that office.
It was a political bombshell, taking not only the public but seasoned commentators and politicians alike by surprise. On Wednesday, the Irish Taoiseach, or head of government, Leo Varadkar, announced his resignation as leader of his Fine Gael party and his intention to step down as Taoiseach as soon as a successor is in place. Young, openly gay, and of dual Irish-Indian descent, Leo Varadkar has often been seen internationally as embodying a new, progressive and socially tolerant Ireland. But domestically, his image and political legacy are far more complicated, as I found out when I asked Dr. Owen O'Malley, Associate Professor in Political Science at Dublin City University, to talk to me about the significance of Varadkar's time as Taoiseach.
So a lot of what he brought to the office that was new was that he embodied some sort of modern progressive Ireland because he was openly gay man, because he was the son of an immigrant, an Indian doctor. He seemed to, for the rest of the world, embody this idea that Ireland was this kind of progressive modern country. And now he as himself was actually quite a conservative person. He probably ended up hearing all of that kind of talk about him being embodying the new modern Ireland and sort of bought into it. And it, to some extent, then forgot himself, forgot that he was this kind of conservative person. And so he started to move towards bringing in policies that were modern, progressive, liberalizing, which his own party didn't really want and didn't kind of buy that much. And so he was neither loved by his own party because he'd moved away, nor was he loved by the left, who he was sort of courting because he wasn't seen as kind of true to his word. He wasn't seen as authentic to some extent.
Owen, when Leo Varadkar made his resignation announcement, he did warn about speculation about the real reasons behind it. But the timing of his resignation does, of course, come shortly after the government lost 2 referenda on updating a controversial aspect of the Constitution, which involved the so-called Women in the Home clause. Perhaps you could explain to me what this was all about and how the government managed to lose so badly.
So it wasn't really that clear what they were about. We knew where they came from. So within the Irish Constitution, there are some pretty archaic clauses which possibly made sense in the 1930s when the Constitution was written about the primary importance of the family. In particular, there's a clause where that the state would value mothers' duties in the home and seek to support her place in the home. The government probably had the opportunity to just delete the offending clause, but it chose to do something that kept nobody happy. So it didn't keep the kind of progressive people happy who wanted to put in clauses that would have given kind of social and economic rights in the Constitution. I think the government sensibly kind of avoided that. But rather than just delete, it put in things that said it would strive to support carers, for instance. And that satisfied nobody, really. And so it reflected badly on Varadkar. It reflected badly on his political instincts and his campaigning ability. And he had been chosen as leader of Fine Gael and Taoiseach because he was a great campaigner. He was a great communicator. And he seemed to have lost all that.
Now, there is a big contrast here, isn't there, with the results of previous referenda in Ireland in recent years. There was the one on gay marriage, for example, or the one on abortion rights. Is this, as some people are saying, the end of Ireland's progressive turn? Is the country now reverting back to traditional conservative values?
It's probably pushing it too far. I mean, I don't think if, for instance, you were to rerun the same-sex marriage referendums or the abortion referendum again, I don't think they would be defeated. I think they were different because they were giving real voice to real problems and they were actually doing something. There was a sense that this one was a slightly pointless referendum that was kind of virtue signalling in the Constitution, and maybe the Constitution isn't the place to virtue signal.
Leo Varadkar has resigned as leader of Fine Gael, but he does, of course, stay in place as Taoiseach until his replacement has been named. But what is next for Ireland? Where does the country go from here?
Well, so there's, some speculation that there will be a general election, that it'll bring forward the general election. So there has to be a general election within the next 12 months. I suspect that speculation is wrong, that in fact, if anything, it will push it out to as late a stage as possible. So the Fine Gael party will choose a new leader, and that will happen quite quickly in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And that person will probably be elected Taoiseach, and that the new government will be essentially a continuation of the old government, a coalition between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, which are two kind of traditionally centre-right, relatively conservative parties, and the Green Party. And it'll be probably just a continuation of what we've had. So there will be no great instability in Irish politics as a result of this.
Finally, Leo Varadkar set out how he would like to be remembered in his resignation speech. How will you remember him?
I think when he did kind of list those achievements, I'm not sure that one can look at them and say that he was the leader who delivered any of those things. He was not somebody who had campaigned and led from the front on the abortion issue, on the same-sex marriage issue. He was a guy who had come to office with a slogan that welfare cheats cheat us all. He didn't deliver on that, so the right was disappointed with how he turned out. The left was also disappointed on him. He had a difficult time. He never had a majority. He had to deal with COVID for a couple of years, so he might feel that he didn't get a kind of fair crack at the whip, but he won't have left a legacy that anybody can say that, that was Leo Varadkar's Ireland and that he changed Ireland in any way, positively or negatively.
Dr. Owen O'Malley is Associate Professor in Political Science at Dublin City University. We have a segment all about happiness coming up next, so I'm going to use this short break to practice my best smile. I'm Kate Laycock in Germany. You're listening to Inside Europe. I probably should have known better than to practice my smile, because Europe's a mixed bag when it comes to the Global Happiness Index, published this week to coincide with the UN's International Day of Happiness on March 20th. Finland comes top again, but in the UK there's a worrying increase in happiness disparity between the generations. Nick Martin has been finding out why.
While older Brits, Spaniards and Germans report high levels of happiness, the generational divide appears to be getting wider. The 2024 World Happiness Index, produced by Oxford University and the United Nations, among other organisations, shows that more and more young people in Western Europe are struggling with the complexities of modern life. Everything from the pressures of social media, educational demands and the lack of affordable housing has been blamed. A London-based think tank, the Intergenerational Foundation, or IF, puts much of the problem in, say, the UK, down to the country fast becoming a gerontocracy. That is, a country governed by and for the benefit of older people. The IF's co-founder, Liz Emerson, explained why so many young Brits are having a rough time.
Government spending has been focused on the older grey vote, while taxation has been falling heavily on those who earn their incomes from work. At the same time, younger people have had to pay much more for a university degree in the UK than in other countries. Just this year, the British government has extended the student loan term by another decade to 40 years of repayment. And that would be great if we still had a graduate premium. But in the UK, the graduate premium has been pretty much eroded.
The graduate premium is the extra income a person with a university degree can expect to earn over their lifetime compared to someone without one. The Intergenerational Foundation found that nearly half of recent UK graduates are working in non-graduate jobs. For non-recent graduates, the figure is still over 30%. Most young people in Germany, the Netherlands and the Nordic nations don't pay huge tuition fees, but many of the other economic issues highlighted are just as bad right across Europe.
Young people are facing a quadruple whammy. I mean, they're facing a housing crisis. Rents have gone through the roof. Obviously, we've got the environmental crisis. We've got war. We've got the cost of living crisis post-pandemic.
The housing crisis trumps all other issues, according to Emerson. For decades, older generations who tend to own their own homes have benefited from an almost continuous rise in real estate prices. Young people, on the other hand, have been priced out of buying and forced to compete in an ever-competitive rental market. It's only now that baby boomers are noticing the impact of the intergenerational wealth divide.
We've seen some light at the end of the tunnel. I think older generations are seeing the plight facing their younger relatives, finally. What we're not seeing yet is them turning that concern into help at the ballot box.
Apart from prioritising the needs of younger people, what else are the happiest countries on the index doing right? Jan-Emmanuel Deneve, the editor of the World Happiness Report, says they're better at tackling all forms of wealth inequality.
Wealth does matter, but especially also how wealth is distributed. So in Finland, Denmark, and the other Scandinavian countries, you'll find that wealth is way more evenly distributed. So more people benefit from the wealth that's being generated in these countries. And then also each one supports a welfare state that provides psychological stability.
While sharing the country's economic riches will help, prosperity isn't the be-all and end-all when it comes to the happiest nations.
Something that where the Scandinavian countries really stand out, we find, is in terms of the social fabric, social capital of their society. So people trust each other, they trust the institutions, there's social support available for them, both institutionally and personally. And we find that's less the case in other societies.
Jennifer De Paula, a researcher in social sciences at the University of Helsinki, agrees that the secret to happiness may lie in less materialism and more social cohesion.
There are many components of Finnish happiness that would be really hard to replicate elsewhere because they are intrinsic to the way, for example, the Finnish government and welfare work. There are other aspects of Finnish happiness that we can take inspiration from. For example, the connectedness with nature that seems to be a very important component in the way they gauge their happiness. There seems to be an ability to live in harmony, and that thus contribute to happiness.
Finland may have ranked number one overall, but among young people, the top spot in the World Happiness Index went to Lithuania. The capital, Vilnius, is seen as an attractive destination by many younger workers keen to advance their careers. And ingenious marketing in the city may have also helped. Tourists often struggle to find Vilnius on a map, so the local tourism board ran an ad campaign describing it as the G-spot of Europe. Nick Martin, DW.
Now, I'm not one to be a stickler for credit, but I would like it known that it was I, dear listeners, who tipped Nick Martin off about the Vilnius G-spot connection. You are welcome. Last week, we asked you to guess which European country has won the most Oscars. I would have gone for France myself, if I'm honest, but apparently the answer is in fact Italy. This week, our quiz will be happiness related, so head on over to Spotify to take part. Smile. Inside Europe is, of course, available on all the other usual platforms, including YouTube via the DW Podcasts channel. This is Inside Europe. I'm Kate Laycock in Germany.
Hot dust in the sky on a winter's day. Plastic bottles in the sea 1,000 miles away. Acid rain from the clouds turn the trees to grey. Playing Russian roulette with our future. Vapor trails smoke the sky like a cigarette. Politicians ride the skies in a private jet. Seems they haven't realized the situation yet. Self-destruction is the etiquette. We're smoking the future like a cigarette. 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 We're smoking the future.
This is Inside Europe, and I'm Kate Laycock in Germany. We have an environment-themed half hour coming up for you now, starting with this.
We are here to present a bold Ukrainian ambition. Ukraine has a clear intention to become a green superpower of Europe.
And ending with this.
Stop Rosebank, stop Rosebank, stop Rosebank, stop Rosebank now.
In between, we'll be finding out how hydroelectricity generation could impact the Loch Ness monster. We'll explain that shortly. And what it's like living in a city where public transport is absolutely free.
Broadcasting from Germany. This is Inside Europe.
The demand for clean energy will rise and is rising everywhere. But we know also from these challenging times that geopolitics is also interfering in this world. And therefore it is so important for us that we are not only talking the talk, but that we are walking the walk.
Fighting talk from Germany's Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, there, as she gave the welcoming address at Berlin's Energy Transition Dialogue Conference this week, one of the world's most important forums on the global energy transition. The oblique reference to geopolitics will, of course, have been taken as a reference to the dramatic shake-up of the European energy landscape brought about by Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Earlier, I spoke to one of the Ukrainian delegates at the conference, Svetlana Romanko, founding director of the Ukrainian grassroots campaigning organisation Razom We Stand, co-hosts of a side event focusing on rebuilding Ukraine's power sector with green technologies.
A very important thing from the opening plenary took my attention. It was said by Dr. Fatih Birol, the IEA head, who also is saying that if we impose a full ban on Russian fossil fuels, now Russian economy will decline by 50 or 60% by 2030. And Germany, as the driving force, the engine of the European Union and political influence, has to turn the face, investors' face, basically, into the complexity of war-destroyed Ukraine infrastructure and help us to rebuild and replace existing thermal power plants, which are not yet bombed, because we know that situation is changing every single day, even at night, and a significant part of the infrastructure of Ukraine's coal industry is beyond repair already. And nearly all coal-fired power plants have been damaged by airstrikes or hostilities, and several power units have been destroyed, and many mines in the Russian-occupied territories have been flooded. But it's so huge, and we are so hopeful and optimistic being present at this conference and trying to put a spotlight these important issues that we don't need to add to existing coal capacity to extend the suffering. We want to bring the message that this can't wait. We can't do it next year or the year after next year. We need to do it now, and we need to fix both banning Russian fossil fuels, but also completely replacing coal power plants with renewables.
And your mission, basically, in the next couple of days is to convince German investors to invest in the future of Ukrainian energy production and a green transition in Ukraine. But at the moment, the German grid is, of course, still very much dependent upon domestic brown coal production. And Greenpeace has actually just published data showing that the country's largest investment funds continue to put billions of euros into fossil fuel companies whose business activities are undermining the Paris Climate Agreement. So what are the risks of making German investment central to Ukraine's energy transition?
No money should go to brown coal industry or any other fossil fuel industry. And the current situation in Ukraine represents a once-a-century opportunity to direct strategic investment in the clean energy reconstruction of Ukraine, which will benefit everyone in Europe and can create strong and lasting cooperation between Germany and Ukraine. We see the Germany efforts in Ukraine to help us rebuild green. We see it, and we appreciate appreciate it. But the public money must not flow into fossil fuels. In Ukraine, there are simply no alternatives to wind and solar when we talk about energy security. And unlike Germany, brown coal, which is cheap to mine in open pits, Ukraine coal was deep underground mines, a big part of which are now in occupied territories. Ukraine lost access to them completely, and the major risks to the security of all of Europe can emerge from missing opportunities if German technologies and investments are not directed towards Ukraine's green reconstruction.
Perhaps I could invite you to set out for me the vision that you and your partners have brought to Berlin this week. What would a green, sustainable Ukraine look like? What would the key steps to getting there be? And are there any precedents that you're looking to?
Yes, absolutely. And we are here to present hope, and we are here to present a bold Ukrainian ambition. Ukraine has a clear intention to become a green superpower of Europe and moving away from the unsustainable Soviet paradigm in the power sector. Because I want to remind here that Ukrainian economy, Ukrainian industry is still consuming 30% of more energy burned from coal than European countries. It's really energy intense, and this is not a good energy. This is dirty coal energy and fossil fuel energy. And but if we just really abandon this Soviet paradigm in the power sector and embrace the smart, renewable, and clean energies of the future, is the key step to start with. And outdated thermal power plants and inefficient gas-fired boilers can be completely replaced by efficient renewable energy systems in a matter of 1 decade. And Ukraine's power grid infrastructure also requires a major overhaul to make it smart and fit for an electrified future. And just to highlighting that, given the huge potential for renewable energy deployment and energy efficiency improvements for Ukraine, wearing off from fossil fuel dependency and achieving deep decarbonization in the short term will be much more straightforward than anywhere in the world and can create an important global showcase of energy transition and rebuilding, which is the rebuilding of the war-torn country and basically rising from the war ashes. It's a very strong vision that we are completely blown away with as a Ukrainian team. We want everyone to believe that this is possible, and we will. And today, Ukraine has a unique opportunity to redesign its key industries and infrastructures. And by destroying major industrial assets, which we have seen a lot over these 2 horrific years, honestly speaking, which were dependent on coal and gas, Putin has inadvertently created conditions for Ukraine's rapid energy transition and industrial transformation. And Ukraine has even, just my very last point, that Ukraine has even joined the Power Past Coal Alliance, and Ukraine has outlined its intention to play an important role in the fight against climate change, supplying clean energy and developing clean energy technologies together with Germany and with the EU.
I was talking to Ukrainian environmentalist Svetlana Romanko there, founding director of the Ukrainian organisation Razom We Stand, which was set up in 2022 to campaign for an immediate and total embargo on Russian fossil fuels. Now, if I say Loch Ness, you say monster. It's got to be right. Scotland's Loch Ness monster legend is known all around the world, and it's one of Scotland's biggest tourist draws. Now, you may or may not believe in the creature known as Nessie, but if she does exist, then she might be in for a bumpy ride. Environmental groups fear the ecology of Loch Ness, the UK's biggest body of fresh water by volume, could be badly impacted by pumped storage hydroelectricity schemes, impacting fish and other wildlife, possibly up to and including the Loch Ness monster herself. Richard Baines reports.
There's no doubt that this place would attract tourists even without tales of a mysterious creature in the water.
My name's Michael Bell, I'm the owner of Loch Ness Cruises, and we run hourly boat trips on Loch Ness. What we really focus on here is the natural history around us, all the beautiful landscapes you can see, and just seeing a little slice of the world that's been untouched by modern developments.
The loch, which is Scots for lake, is 230 metres deep, and it stretches in a straight line for 36 kilometres along the Great Glen, surrounded by snow-capped mountains and wooded hills.
Biggest impact that we're concerned about on Loch Ness is going to be the fluctuating water level.
What's planned here is a pumped storage hydroelectricity scheme. When the wind blows strongly and wind turbines make more electricity than Scotland can use, the extra power will be used to pump water from Loch Ness up to Loch Kemp, 150 metres higher. Then, when the wind drops, it can pour back down through turbines to recover the electricity.
They're talking about this scheme being able to change the water level by 75 centimetres, so that is going to have an outstanding visual impact on the area. On the far side of Urquhart Bay, the water level is about 1 metre at the most. So if we drop down by 75 centimetres, it's going to expose about 100 metres of shoreline that's never usually seen.
That much change could also mean Mike's jetty for loading passengers will either be too high or be flooded.
I'm Brian Shaw, I'm Director of the Ness District Salmon Fishery Board.
The Fishery Board looks after the loch.
The salmon are looking for the way out of Loch Ness. They're going to sense this water leaving Loch Ness, and they're just simple animals, so they respond to environmental cues like current, water flows, and we think they're going to be attracted to the pump storage hydro intakes, and they will be delayed there, and they're likely to be subject to predation from the pike in the loch or birds.
There's already a smaller pumped storage scheme on Loch Ness and another has permission to be built. But the Loch Kemp scheme would be much bigger.
If the three of them were pumping water uphill, the level of Loch Ness, this vast body of water, could drop by over half a metre overnight.
Brian took me to Foyers on the loch's south shore.
A 50 centimetre drop in the level of Loch Ness would take the loch level 5 or 6 metres out from here, so that's the important part of the shoreline that is at risk of damage from frequent and rapid fluctuations in water level.
And we can just reach in here, pick up a stone, like that one, and see what's underneath
So there you are, you've got stonefly larvae on the rock there, so these important parts of the ecology of Loch Ness live specifically on this shallow, productive habitat.
And that's what feeds the whole thing.
Yeah. If you start to impact the productivity of the shoreline, there will be an impact on the brown trout population in the loch.
Brian fears that what preys on trout, which might just be something very large, could then go hungry. Local fishing guide Gordon Mingus summed up concerns.
They say there's supposed to be a beastie out there called Nessie. It obviously has to feed on something. And if you start messing around with the food chain, that's going to affect whatever is in here, if it is in here.
This is a Dock 4 weir. As you can see, there's metal pilings. They run all the way along.
Fishery Trust biologist Chris Daphne studies freshwater eels. They're younger called elvers. They're much smaller than salmon smolts and can pass through the fish screens on pump intake.
You're going to have structures that are going to be sucking water out of Loch Ness. The elvers tend to hug the shorelines, so there's a good chance that they're going to be actually drawn up, and then they've got to try and get back out again once they reach maturity, which means going through a turbine, which means they're going to get chopped up.
Some people even believe that supposed monster sightings could be large eels.
We don't really know how big the eels get. They could be 3, 4, 5 feet long. Nobody knows for sure exactly what animals, what species are actually in the lake, because it's such a big lump of water. But what we can do is at least try and protect the things that we know about. We're going to be protecting the stuff that we don't know about.
The scheme's development company, Statera, said the dramatic change of water levels suggested by opponents was highly unlikely thanks to a range of precautions. They said the expected changes were unlikely to be noticeable and unlikely to affect any aquatic life. They also said that the company could help in dealing with the impacts of climate change on the loch. Many local people are still hoping that the scheme's environmental impact will see it quashed by local government regulators. But the drive for more environmentally friendly power could gain it backing from central government, which is likely to have the final say. Richard Baines, 4DW, at Loch Ness in the Scottish Highlands.
Now, whilst there may be choppy waters ahead for my favourite deep-water monster, times are looking up for one of my favourite bugbears, free public transport. At the end of last year, the French city of Montpellier, population 500,000, became the biggest European metropolitan area yet to introduce the policy. So, what difference does it make to the locals? And what do companies make of the fact that they're being taxed in order to fund it? Lisa Louis was curious.
As Montpellier slowly wakes up on this Monday morning, Ryan Chabi is on her way to work. Since December 2023, the 31-year-old no longer takes her parents' car to her workplace. She goes by bus and tram.
Bonjour. C'est une très bonne idée.
Free public transport is a really good idea, especially for people like myself who think twice before spending 50 euros on a monthly subscription. I only earn 1,950 euros gross per month. It's similar for my sister, who now also takes public transport.
About half an hour later, she gets off a tramway in Montpellier's northeastern neighbourhood of Castelnau-le-Lay.
It's taken me 10 minutes less than by car. I like this stress-free way of travelling. Plus, I'm protecting the environment.
The public transport scheme is funded via a 2% wage tax that companies with at least 11 employees must pay.
Bonjour.
Such as the one where Ryan works as the assistant of Myrène Lafourcade. She's the CEO of CMAX, a mid-sized company that provides easy-to-use, no-code management software for businesses. Lafourcade doesn't mind paying up, on the contrary.
Our company used to be in an area with poor public transport connections. That's why we moved to this location, which is just a 3-minute walk from a tram stop. For once, the taxes we pay are being used for something that benefits society.
CMAX has 60 employees and an annual turnover of 1.5 million euros. It aims to recruit up to 10 more staff this year. CEO Lafourcade tells me that sustainability will remain a crucial element of their expansion plans.
As a software developer, we use servers that run exclusively on renewable energy. We have planted fruit trees in the garden, and we limit the electricity that we use for lighting and air conditioning. Last year, we had our carbon footprint calculated. We've been buying too much plastic, for instance, so there's still leeway for improvement.
The city's socialist-led government is pleased with such efforts. It threw a party to celebrate the start of Montpellier's free public transport in December 2023. Michael de la Fosse is the mayor of Montpellier.
Ça permet de protéger le pouvoir d'achat.
Free public transport gives citizens some of their purchasing power back. It's an ecological and social measure. It helps us fight global warming, but doesn't punish people and brings everybody in. The less cars there are, the cleaner the air we breathe in.
Mayor de la Fosse remembers the moment he understood the city needed to take more climate adaptation measures.
Quand j'étais candidat aux élections municipales,
On the 29th of June 2019, when I was still a candidate running in the municipal elections, he tells me, I arrived here on the Place de la Comédie in the city centre. The temperature that day was 48.5 degrees Celsius. It was so hot that the square was deserted, and it actually felt like a desert. That's when I understood that the next city government needed to make changes. And so Montpellier has been taking action.
on a fait des aides pour que les gens achètent des vélos à essence électrique.
We are subsidising the purchase of electric bikes, have constructed bike lanes and planted greenery. We are also planting 50,000 additional trees. We are doing construction works to protect our water resource to make sure we can survive in hotter temperatures. And we are changing our heating systems. We have a proper public climate master plan.
Part of this plan is a new tram line, the 5th in Montpellier. It'll connect the University Paul Valéry, where more than 20,000 students are signed up. Adrien Lamoglia is a lecturer for geography at Paul Valéry.
This is the university's entry, and you can see there are construction works on the way. We have 2 stops, right here. There will be additional bike lanes and some parking lots for cars, but not many. We are also transforming this square, which used to be a parking, into a pedestrian area.
The university has set up numerous new bike parking spots. Lamoglia is hoping these won't only be used by students.
Some teachers, 40% of whom come by car right now, might also take the tram in the future, as there is this option. A good public transport network is crucial for free public transport to make a difference.
The new tram line should be up and running by the end of next year.
Here in the city centre, it's very convenient to hop on one of these very colourful tramways that run every few minutes.
But not everywhere in Montpellier is served in the same way. This is Saint-Jean-de-Védas, part of Greater Montpellier, and located about 7 kilometres southwest of the city centre. This suburb has more than 12,000 inhabitants and counting. Hugo Dayan lives in Montpellier centre but works in a flower shop in Saint-Jean-de-Védas. He's part of a group that says the money spent on free public transport should instead be invested in extending the network further.
This is Saint-Jean-de-Védas' only tram stop. The tram only runs every 15 minutes, whereas this is the end of the workday, and people need to go home. The transport connection is so bad that the local town hall has even set up a shuttle you have to pay for in one district here. You need to take into account that a city is getting bigger when making public transport free, or else you only please people in the well-connected city centre and forget about those living on the outskirts.
The new tram line will run through Saint-Jean-de-Védas, but Dayan is hoping additional connections will follow here and elsewhere, so that eventually all residents will be able to fully benefit from Montpellier's free public transport. Lisa Louis, DW, Montpellier.
We have a real treat in store for you in just a minute, so do stay tuned. And that is actually a pun because it's a musical treat. We're going to be in the company of London's Climate Choir. That's here with me, Kate Laycock, on Inside Europe.
Poison in the water, but still the fact remains. You deny it ever happened, deny it ever will, deny it ever happened, but it keeps on happening still. There's poison in the water, poison in the rain. Poison in the water, but still the fact remains. You deny it ever happened, deny it ever will, deny it ever happened, but it keeps on happening still.
Climate protests come in many forms. Often demonstrations and direct actions target governments and political bodies for not establishing legislation or creating a greener agenda. Gas and oil companies are also obvious targets, as are the banks and institutions which finance them. Tactics vary between groups and individuals, but there is one tactic in particular that's been striking a chord in England recently. The Climate Choir movement started in the city of Bristol, but has now spread to other major cities in England. The activists penetrate AGMs and disrupt them by singing songs, or sing in public outside organisations they are protesting against. Ashish Sharma brings us this soundscape recorded at the recent rehearsals of the London Climate Choir movement.
My name's Sally Davis, and I am one of the leaders of the London Climate Choir, which is just one of many climate choirs. I'm an instrumentalist too, so I've been playing in bands on processions for decades, sort of on peace demos, and instruments carry really well, but of course they don't have words. So the idea of large numbers of people singing in harmony really appeals to me.
One chance, only one chance. My name is Kate Honey, and I'm one of the musical directors of the Climate Choir movement. I really care about the climate and the environment, so for me the Climate Choir movement is the perfect way of combining those two things. And I love the fact that it feels like a very depolarising thing to do at a time when, social media and economic pressures are dividing us from each other. I feel this really unites us, and that's so important. It started with a friend of mine, a Quaker, Jo Flanagan, who heard some other singing protests in the US. And she said, wow, this is really making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Stop Rosebank, stop Rosebank, stop Rosebank. But it was only actually at the beginning of this year, with a campaign against the expansion of Bristol Airport, that we decided to call it the Climate Choir Movement and actually make it into a real thing. And then we found that other choirs outside of Bristol, where it started, wanted to join in as well. And by the end of 2023, it was 10 choirs already, and just grew to about 550 singers, and now it's more like 600 singers and 11 choirs.
Stop Rosebank, stop Rosebank, stop Rosebank, stop Rosebank, stop Rosebank now.
Well, like many people, I have children, and what I'm concerned about what their lives are going to be like going forward. And we just have this limited period of time now to actually take action. We've all got a voice. We should be using it in the best way possible to communicate this message.
Great. And then we voice those sounds. We're going to do a long zzz and a long zzz and a long when we've infiltrated AGMs and that sort of thing. Some shareholders sit there looking astonished, embarrassed, really awkward. English people singing, it's a really embarrassing thing for English people. And they look kind of dumbfounded. But others turn around smiling and filming on their mobile phone, so it goes viral. I mean, it's going to go music. It's going to go get out there better than just people shouting.
I was at a kind of a local fete. It was in Highgate, as it happens, and they were singing there. And the harmonies cut through so beautifully, and I've been in the choir for 20 years myself. The climate is exceptionally close to my heart, simply because, it is for everyone in a way now, but because I'm a cyclist. And so you're always right there breathing in everything that is toxic, basically.
This is my first rehearsal at the choir. I'm a sort of failed Extinction Rebellion activist. I managed to turn up at the wrong places at the wrong times, and so I thought, well, perhaps I'll try something a bit more organised and see that I can manage that. So this is, I felt this might play to my strengths a bit. It aligns very much with my core beliefs. I think, planetary climate change is something that all of us should stand up, and I guess I'll be singing in public, not necessarily to a paying audience, which is what I'm used to, so I'm kind of interested in that experience too. That's what bearing witness is about, isn't it? You've got to stand up and say what you believe in at some point.
We focus on making really beautiful protest actions which kind of target the heart of power. That's what we aim for. In particular, the insurance companies and the banks that are financing the fossil fuel industry. When we say, in a witty, beautiful way, just stop financing new oil and gas projects, actually they have had to change their tune. Recently Barclays announced they're not going to finance new oil and gas projects, which is an amazing win. We don't do illegal actions, we're a non-arrestable choir, but we do mass actions in the heart of London, trying to recruit over 100 singers to all sing the same songs together and focus on getting the money out of the fossil fuel industry.